Hi, this is Kamala Murphy, and you are listening to the Heart and Chutzpah podcast, where we talk about giving ourselves permission or having the chutzpah to just claim a right to live really juicy, luscious lives. With our big hearts, we're going to face love and loss, heartache and healing. We'll fall down and rise up again, and through it all, we'll develop our heart and our chutzpah, and we'll find our way to our own unique, luscious, and amazing life. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Kamala Murphy. Welcome to this episode of the Heart and Chutzpah podcast. Today, I am so excited to have a guest with me. Her name is Christy Strauch. She is a wonderful friend of mine, and I am so excited to just have her here and pick her brain, open this dialogue with her, because she's got such great information, and I just love being with her, no matter what. It's like, and I know you will too. Christy Strauch is the money coach for artists and she works with artists and creatives to untangle their beliefs about money, marketing, and finances. Christy has, in her own words, lots of credentials, which we relate to. An MBA from UCLA in finance and marketing. She's had a stint at IBM as a marketing representative. And decades of managing and owning multiple businesses. She's a certified coach and has written 4 books, including Authentic Marketing for Introverts and Passion, Plan, Profit. A new venture she has with her business partner, Chris. They are the founders of Mystics for Hire, which is a site to help connect the real deal mystics with those looking for that real deal guidance. So welcome, Christy. I am so glad to have you here today.
Hi, Kamala.
Yeah. I think we met about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And it was one of those connections that I just felt like a sister. It's just so great to connect with you on this podcast and hear more about the Mystics for Hire and share with the audience more about who you are and how you serve, especially those creatives and artists who, starving artist is just such a thing that we have. And I really feel like you really help artists, creatives, people like me to untangle some of that, the funky programming about it. So yeah. I guess I would like to start with, finding out how you got on this path of, were you always interested in business and finance? Mm-hmm. Because I know you've got this big heart and you're really creative. So it's kind of like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I come from a family of business people, lots of entrepreneurs and small business owners and stuff. So it's sort of in my DNA, I think. But the other thing that's in my DNA is massive trouble with money. And so one of the reasons I'm so interested in it is because I got into trouble with money, it's almost 20 years ago. And I think the root of my own trouble with money was trying to use money to do things that it can't do, like buy love or by especially self-worth or safety or forgiveness. And, I think maybe some people can get away with doing that, and that's a thing in American culture, especially buying self-worth by what we're wearing or what we're driving or the jewelry or whatever we're doing.
The education,
yeah. And there's 1,000 external things that people can purchase, for a long time, I thought if I get the exact right dress, then I know I'm going to be lovable. Mm-hmm. And, I tried to make that work. So it's an intersection, I think, between a lot of just watching people be in business their whole lives, my grandparents, my parents, cousins, and then having my own money issues, troubles, and then really getting curious about where does all this mess come from?
Mm,
There's so much dysfunction around money. And my experience now working with people and working with myself too, with my money issues, is that a lot of this stuff comes from trauma. And creative people experience the most trauma around money because you're making things, you know, you and I've talked about this a bunch, where creatives are making things that have never been seen before. So there's not like go to the internet and look up the price list for this thing that's
right.
never been seen. I mean,
Right.
it's, you know, there are price ranges for everything, but that still doesn't tell you how much to price what you're doing or making. And then the other piece of it is that when you're a creative and you're making something, even in coaching or coaching programs or books like I've written, I'm making something from my heart. And so, you know, there's this conundrum of it's either worth nothing or, you know, it's worth an infinite amount. And it's
Because
really
it's priceless, right?
right. It's priceless. This
Yeah.
thing I did, you know, that
Yeah.
sprang from my psyche and my experience and my own creativity. Oh my goodness, how do I price that?
Yeah.
And then, you know, put a price on it, and people sometimes, you know, will get on social media and tell you how bad it is, or how, you know, crappy this thing is that you made, or crickets, which is the other horrible amount of trauma. Put something out that you did or made or whatever, and no one responds. It's like getting stabbed in the heart.
Yeah.
So anyway, long answer to having my own problems, and then really looking around and seeing they're everywhere. And what's the source? I know both of us, you know, we've tried affirmations and taken a lot of classes and stuff like that. And my experience is that if I don't, and if you don't address the underlying trauma, all that, you can't learn from any of that.
Right.
You
Right.
can't employ what you've learned, because actually business and marketing and finances are not complicated.
Mm-hmm.
A dirty little secret.
Yeah.
Doing money, you know, handling money requires second grade math.
I remember you saying that, and it was kind of a shock. It's like, really? What? You know?
Yeah. Addition and subtraction, and
Yeah.
maybe a little multiplication and division on a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's the stuff you learned even really in first grade. And my great example of this is a pre-verbal toddler. You give them 3 cookies and then try to take one of them away. They really understand subtraction.
Yeah. Right.
So
Right.
that's the evidence to me that money issues don't have anything to do with anybody's ability to understand money at
Mm.
all.
Yeah.
It's about trauma.
Wow. Mm. So do you think artists in particular, or creatives, because we tend to be, uh, this is a generalization, but we tend to be really sensitive, and we are putting out our hearts, on our sleeves and really out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And from the time, I mean, I know this about you and me. I mean, from the time we were little kids, people say, you know, that's weird, or what are you
Yeah.
doing? Or, and like, if you're, I remember, I'm not a visual artist at all, but I remember getting lectured in third grade about making the centers of the flowers purple instead of yellow, like they were supposed to be.
Oh,
You know, that starts early.
yeah.
And people say crazy stuff to creatives, you know, can you make money doing that? Or, oh, my favorite, oh, my kid could do that, you know, my dog could
Oh,
do that,
yeah.
which is very, you know, damaging. It is really like getting stabbed in the heart.
Yeah.
Or, you know, that's the other thing about artists, and this is true for you too, and maybe me, is that most artists, you know, because you're making something that's never been seen before, you're on this forefront, you're
Mm.
ahead of the culture. And the culture freaks out about that. You know, first,
Right.
truth will set you free, but well, we say, you know, first it will piss you off, but also it will scare you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of artists have had people be really afraid about, you know, what the artist is creating. What does it
Mm.
mean? And I don't understand it. There's also a lot of that thing of, I think Americans pride ourselves on this. like, well, I don't know if it's art, but I know what I like.
Right. Right.
And denigrating art as if it's some sort of, you can't understand it, or it's a luxury, or
Yeah. Yeah. That thing about a luxury, or it's frivolous. And
yes.
I know one of the newsletters you had done had spoken about, you know, art is not a luxury or frivolous, but it's like the heart and soul of culture. Is I think something like that. Can
Mhm.
you say more about that? Because I think it's really important.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One is, people often say, or I've heard lots of artists say, oh, it's just a luxury, only rich people buy art. But if you look around at your walls, no matter who is listening to this podcast right now, you look at your walls, you have art on your walls.
Mm,
You're probably wearing some art,
mm,
and possibly even this.
yeah,
And it's every place,
right.
all over your life, in ways that you maybe don't even notice. And then the other thing is, art is the place where culture starts to change. So if
Mm,
you think about, like, Black Lives Matter, for instance, the explosion of art around Black Lives Matter
yeah.
is profound. And it's a way to start introducing, I mean, not introducing the idea like it's new, but really talking about that concept artistically, visually, with songs. That's another place. I interviewed this guy a couple of weeks ago on Instagram, who's a musician. He lives in Costa Rica. And part of what's going on with him in Costa Rica is he's writing protest songs. I mean, think about our legacy from the 60s, and and the 70s. We're not every generation's got its protest songs.
Right.
That's where the culture change starts to happen.
Mm,
Artists see things and express things in a way that, I don't want to say there's such a thing as artists and normal people, because I think everybody's really creative. It's just some people are more attuned to it. But
right.
artists are the ones that start saying, hey, this is not right. This must change.
Yeah. As you're saying this, I'm just getting chills because I feel like I look at my walls right now, it's like, it doesn't look very hard, but things that uplift the spirit, and the songs that you're talking about, and
Yeah,
it stirs something in
it
us.
does. It so does. I've got downstairs in the living room, I'm lucky to have this giant expanse of white wall. And I actually I bought a painting, or a couple paintings, from a woman, and she came in. I hired her to hang all the rest of the art that I have. Just a little problem with buying a lot of art. And so when I walk into my house, and the first thing I see is that big old wall with all those paintings on it, I get a couple different feelings that I wasn't conscious of until I started writing about this. I get
Mm,
this feeling, of, oh man, this is a beautiful place.
mm,
And it's it's a physical feeling, and and an emotion, but it's also a body reaction.
yeah.
And the second thing I feel is this sort of mix of pride and sovereignty. I
Mm,
picked that art out. That's mine. I mean, the artist made it. I didn't create it, but I chose that art. And this wall is sort of a demonstration of my ability to select art that I really like and hang it in a way that's gorgeous.
mm,
And it reminds me, because I was in a relationship for a long time, God bless him, where because we lived in his house, there was a limit to how much art I could put on the walls.
right. Right.
And I didn't realize how much that mattered to me until I
Mm,
moved into this place and was able to put my own art on the walls, that really mattered. And it isn't just because the art matches the sofa. It's the it's a statement about what's important to me.
yes.
So that whole thing of trying to articulate what art means to people, that's the other thing that makes marketing art hard. Is
Mm,
you have an emotional response to art, everybody does. But trying to talk about what that emotional response is, when you're describing a painting or music or anything like that. It's a real challenge. I'm working on that now, trying to figure out how do we put words around something so that, because everybody needs art, I think. Not everybody's your client, but some subset of or people are your clients, and they're looking for an emotional experience with your art, but they're mostly not able to articulate what that experience is.
Right. Right.
True for coaching too.
Yeah. Because I am thinking, there are certain things, maybe there'll be uproar about this. I look at a Jackson Pollock painting and go, eh,
Yeah.
it's just like, eh. But, something with beautiful colors and maybe softer or,
Right.
what my spirit thinks is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That's, and what I like doesn't appeal to everyone. So,
No, and that is a really good thing to know.
yeah.
It's because you or as a creative, your people isn't everybody.
Yeah.
But they are somebody.
Yeah.
And they do have characteristics. I mean, we could even go into this a little bit about what art does appeal to you.
Yeah.
And there are artists out there for whom you are their people.
Right. So I want to go, listeners, there are so many routes I want to go today. So we're just going to have Christy back several times. But there's something too about creatives, and we tend to think creatives are the visual artists or the vocal artists. So we have this sort of narrow description of what creatives are. So because you work with a wide variety, can you share? And I know that, I'm sorry, there's so many things I want to ask. The creative is so much more. And I think a lot of people just don't recognize how much creativity we all have. So can you speak a little bit about that? Because what if more of us really are creative and just don't even know it?
Yes. Well, I believe that's true. And so I'm trying to actually articulate this for myself, because it's who I love to work with the most are people who are doing some big things, and maybe they don't even look like they relate to each other. So I'm working. So one of the, taglines I'm trying out is that you see a chaotic pile of creative possibilities, and I see a coherent business. So somebody who is, well, you're in a good example. You don't necessarily call your stuff a pile of, creative chaos.
Oh, yeah, I do. It's here and here and here and here.
Yeah. So you're the poster child. You're very creative. And this is what I see anyway, that there's something coming through you. And there's some things that that the world needs you to teach. And what maybe makes the most sense in your case is a coaching program and individual coaching and individual work and stuff like that. And then the challenge is, okay, it's a coaching program and it's work with individuals, but what's the program? What's trying to come through you? What is it because it's the same thing as with art. What is it that people want to experience when they work with you? What are the emotions that they have now, and what do they maybe want to feel differently about, or what do they want to change? And that's challenging to put words around, but it's not impossible.
Right.
And so that is kind of like the umbrella over all creatives, is that something's emerging. Let's figure out who needs what that is and how to talk about it so they can recognize that it's you that can provide it to them. So it can be really challenging to put the words around. I think that's the part I'm working on the hardest right now, to actually translate what that you're doing into words that somebody else can recognize that that's what they need. Yeah. But there are so many people, like I'm working with a couple therapists right now who, and separately, who are both an institute, in different ways. They're both going to end up setting up institutes for different topics. So to me, that's highly creative. They both have different ways of approaching certain kinds of therapy that they're very educated and they're grounded in the research and all that stuff. But it's not like they're making up a bunch of things. They're just seeing something that's not out there that can help people in the therapy realm. So I think that's highly creative.
Right. So it sounds too like you have a vision that many of us don't have, that you can see this creation that to us looks like absolute chaos or mess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's my superpower, is
Um,
the ability to see what the end game might look like.
yeah.
And that is a really interesting thing, because I know my my brain is weird, but to be able to see what the
It's a
end game might.
creative brain, Christy.
Yes, yes, that's true. God, it is a creative brain. But to be able to see what the end game is and then actually figure out what the products are underneath that and what to charge for them. That part is, I like seeing the big vision and then actually bringing it down to reality of, okay, what are you going to sell? How much is it going to cost?
Right.
How are you going to deliver that?
Yeah. So there's something about the wounding that many creatives have had. And I'm kind of like, because I know that you do this. Are there some things that you have developed for yourself that help individuals, creatives, because I know your books, are certainly in that realm. It's like, how do you help people sort of get to that place where the wounding isn't what keeps them stuck anymore?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And the answer is parts work. So this is my new best friend, actually not that new, because so the idea, if you and I've done this a bunch, but if you ever say to yourself, one part of me wants to go to the gym, but the other part wants to sit on the couch and watch Netflix and eat chocolate.
Yeah.
Then you intuitively realize that you have parts inside yourself.
Yeah.
And we all have parts that drive our money behavior. And so the secret weapon, it's not really secret because the parts work has been around. Carl Jung, I don't know, I codified it, I guess, but even if you go back and read Paul in the Bible, I think it's in the Corinthians, where he talks about he knows what to do, but he can't make himself do it.
Right.
The awareness that there are parts inside us is ancient.
Yeah.
And so I end up in coaching sessions talking to the parts of people that are driving the money behavior and making that conscious. So this whole idea of parts work, it's used in Gestalt therapy, but I'm not a therapist, but there's this couple, Hal and Sidra Stone, that wrote this book, called Embracing Ourselves. And so they talk about how to talk to parts and what's the origin, how do parts even, how do they originate? And they come from lots of places, but one of the places they come from is trauma. They come to protect us. So the reason to do this, I am too creative to handle money. There's a part inside that's saying that. And it's sort of like a smokescreen, because it's not that you're too creative to handle money. It's that there's so much trauma around it that the part is saying, we're not handling it. And we're going to pretend like we can't. But the real thing is, we're not handling it because we're not going to have any more trauma around it.
Right. Right.
So those parts are protective.
Right.
And they have, this sounds so weird, they have good hearts. They all are trying to protect us. They just have outdated strategies. A lot of the parts, and we've gone to class for this, a lot of the parts inside us originated or were created when we were children.
Right. 5.
Right.
3.
5. Yes.
Yeah.
And so those parts, even though their hearts are in the right place and they really want to protect us, they're using strategies we developed in childhood.
Right. For a child.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Where we didn't have very many choices or resources.
Right.
So one awesome way, at least that I learned, when there was trauma was to avoid it. When the going gets tough, the tough run away. Those are my parts about certain things. It's like, wait, what I developed when I was 6 in this scenario is to get the heck out of Dodge,
Right.
go somewhere else, avoid the person, stop talking.
Go
And
hide, find a
hide.
closet. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Or, I can hide inside myself to I used to tell myself to school my face so that people couldn't tell what I was feeling.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have a part inside me that is that some people would call poise and other people would call lying by omission.
Yes.
Yeah. So those, and the inner critic is a part also.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, I've gone to many, many seminars and read a lot of books about how to squish or kill or sideline or, the inner critic, but that's just another part that's trying to protect me. And it's possible to talk to that part and help it update its strategies from screaming at me because it's so afraid to cooperating.
It's really interesting to hear, especially it's scared.
Terrified.
Yeah.
Yes, terrified. And you know how people behave when we're terrified.
Yeah.
You scream or you lash out or you run away.
Yeah.
And just those strategies. I like to separate the motivation of the part from the strategies it's using to try and get what it needs.
Yeah.
Because I mean, maybe not every part we have inside us is protective. Some of them are, I've got an inner artist, an inner creative, which I talk to sometimes. But a lot of those parts, especially the really loud, strident ones that even maybe sound mean, those guys are protective.
Yeah.
They just don't know how to do it any other way. They learned when they were 6 that the best way to do it, or in my case, like my inner critic is very vocal and can be really strident and mean. I learned that from my parents because their inner critics were like that.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So you can
get that thing about.
Go ahead, finish that sentence.
Oh, I was just thinking, because my inner critic is vicious, just vicious. And, I didn't pick that up on my own. It came through a long line of vicious critics, right?
Yeah, terrified parts.
Yeah.
So in coaching, I use voice dialogue where I actually talk to the part and the part can talk back, or when you're doing it by yourself, I just do parts work where I write to the part. I do that almost every day because I'll frequently, like I try every day to write to the part of me that knows what I should do today. Yes. I've got 45 things to do. Where do I start?
Right.
And what's important to pay attention to? I'll call that part guidance. And I ask it every morning, what do you want me to do, be, and know today?
Oh.
And then I write down what I hear, and sometimes maybe not so, I'm not tapped into my guidance. I'm tapped into some other thing, but I can almost always tell. And I talk a lot to the part. I'm in the middle of finishing the 4th book. Actually, it's at the editor now, but I talk to the book. I talk to the book. I talk to the part of me that knows what needs to be in the book, especially when I get stuck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
And you can talk to your creativity.
Yeah.
Ask it what it wants to do next.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really, and I talk to my business, what should we be doing now?
Yeah.
I write a newsletter once a week and
I know you do.
Well, I get help putting that thing out. I can write it, but after that, so someone super helpful helps me get it out. But if I'm stuck, I ask, okay, what should I write about here? But let me talk to the part that knows what I should write about in the newsletter. And it's really interesting. You can talk to the part of you. I read this in Daniel Pink's newsletter about 3 months ago. So he's a New York Times bestselling author. And I thought, when he said this in his newsletter, I'm like, yes, it's vindicating. He said, pretend somebody is coming in to your business and they're going to take over your job and they are hyper competent. They know exactly what to do in your job, what would they tell you?
Huh.
And I've tried that a couple of times and I've gotten really clear answers. You need to do
Wow.
this and this and this. It's like, oh God, you're right. I do.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
Very
fun.
cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Hmm. I'll have to
Try that.
check that out. Yeah. Um, well, Christy, there are a couple of things we need to sort of wrap up, but you and Chris have started this new site, Mystics for Hire, which I'm on and I'm really excited about. And I think that this, for many reasons, took a lot of heart and chutzpah for you and Chris to start this. So I wanted to ask you about that. And then there's one other question that I forgot to mention that I might be asking. But let's talk about the Mystics for Hire, what that experience has been like and what your hopes for.
About 3 years ago, Chris and I are close friends, and he sent me this article from the New York Times about rituals and how we've abandoned our rituals
Mm-hmm.
that we used to do when we were in a tribe.
Right.
And that it was really important to do rituals. And he and I had separately tried to find people to do things like house blessings. I think he and his husband maybe did a vow, reaffirmation of their vows. Just there's so many of these rituals, and it's hard to find people to do that stuff. So we started looking around to see if there was how do people find somebody to do rituals? And it's really funny. A friend of ours said, well, I called a yoga studio and said, do they know anybody that does this? Well, yeah, maybe we call this other person over here. It's very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought we should do a website, a directory website. And then we sort of branched out past rituals to actual, what we're calling mystics, which are people like you who are tapped into the energy outside the five senses. Mm. And, the difficult thing about that, there's lots of people who claim to be that way, but they're not. Right. But there are real people like you who are. And we really wanted to start a site where people could find people like you, because there are so many other sources of guidance besides the five senses, in addition to the five senses.
Right. Yeah. And it's how do we tap into that? So,
yeah.
So I'm really excited about it because it really is opening up. And these days are really ripe for people to, I just feel like, even for me, I feel like I've been so cooped up, and it's like I need to get out and, access more, because there's a reason all of this is happening. And, what is it priming us for?
Yeah, I believe that too.
So I will put the information for Mystics for Hire and your website for people to take a peek at and find out more. But I always ask guests, if you could whisper in the ear of a younger version of yourself, what would you whisper to her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's weird. I went to a party on Saturday night and we asked each other questions, and this was one of the questions.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, boy, what I said at the party was relax.
Mm-hmm.
That everything, that you're safe and that all is well and that you are held and protected. Mm-hmm. It felt like this a lot on and off through life, super like anxious and afraid, and manufacture things to be afraid of that weren't actually there. Yeah. So I think I'd tell myself, my younger self, two things. I was picturing myself when I was 15. One is, it's okay to relax. And two is, get a spiritual program sooner rather than later, because it'll be much easier to relax once you get that.
How true is that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to share or mention to the listeners?
something about you, how completely amazingly intuitive you are.
Mm.
And that's, you have provided me with deep intuition about my life, and not the whole when I'm going to win the lottery business.
Right.
But
Because shoot, I still don't know what
no, no. And it turns out winning the lottery does not solve your problems.
That's
But,
true.
yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
But that you are just so deeply intuitive, and that's been really, really helpful, which is too weak of a word. Supportive, inspirational, and foundational, kind of like helping me find my foundation.
Mm. Thank you. So, listeners, if you can't tell, Christy and I have sort of this mutual admiration thing going on. I just adore her. Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll be back next week. Thank you again. Until next time, blessings. Bye for now. So there you have it, a little heart and chutzpah for the day. Today, give yourself a little permission to be both big-hearted and a little feisty, just like you were created to be. Thank you for joining me. I hope you'll reach out to me via social media at Kamala Murphy, and it's Murphy with an EY, or at my website, kamalamurphy.com. Again, thank you for joining me. Many blessings. Until next time. Bye for now.